viewers, there are literally just hours to go for the very, very crucial US presidential elections. The stakes are very high for both the candidates. Former President Donald Trump and current Vice President Kamala Harris campaigning till the very last moment to make that final impression on the voters. Remember, the role of swing states is very, very important. The role of Indian diaspora becomes extremely critical because of their presence, especially in a few swing states there, which are going to be a deciding factor. Times Now viewers has been tracking all the developments from the ground, and we have spoken to some very influential insiders to get a better perspective on what promises to be an important election for India as well. For instance, there are persons of Indian origin involved on both sides. Kamala Harris's mother hails from India, and on the other side, Donald Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance's wife, Usha, is also of Indian origin. Another person of Indian origin you may hear of a lot in the future is Ashwin Ramaswamy, who is a 25-year-old Democrat and a candidate for the Georgia State Senate. Here's what he had to say when we spoke to him.
My first question to you is that, at such a young age, you're the first and the youngest Hindu young candidate to have been nominated by the party as its official candidate. What has been your journey like, and what motivated you to join politics?
Well, thank you so much for having me here today. It's been an incredible journey. And my own background is I grew up in the suburbs of Atlanta, a place called Johns Creek. My parents came here from India in the early 90s. And my own background is in computer science and law. But growing up here, I got so much from this diverse community here in America. And I always thought about how can I give back to my own community? Part of that came from my own Hindu upbringing and values. I went to a organization called Chinmaya Mission Balvihar, where I learned about my own values, culture, traditions. We learned about something called seva, which means community service, giving back to the community and giving more than what we take. So that's what always stuck with me. So I did my undergraduate degree in computer science at Stanford and a law degree at Georgetown.
You are a son of immigrants. Immigration has been a key issue in the U.S. politics. It's also an issue for the U.S. presidential elections. What do you think are the other key issues for this presidential race? Because in addition to the Senate race for which you are contesting, the presidential elections are also underway in the U.S., and the voting will take place on the 5th of November.
So some of the key issues that we're facing is, first of all, gun safety. We have too many mass shootings happening and not enough action on gun control. So that's something I'll be fighting for at the state level. And I know the Harris-Walz ticket will be fighting for at the national level. The other big issue here is reproductive health care. We have in Georgia a very extreme abortion ban, which makes it hard for women to get life-saving treatments to ensure that they can have the health care that they need. The final issue is respect for democracy. We need leaders who are going to do the right thing and tell the truth and focus on protecting the right to vote. Those are the big issues that I see happening here in Georgia and across the country.
But if you look at the Trump campaign and the Harris campaign, what the sense that you're getting from the early voting results and also the polls that are taking place, that it's a very neck-to-neck tight race. Who do you think is likely to win? I know you're a Democrat, so you are likely to say it's Harris. But how concerned about you about the kind of performance we are seeing from Trump?
I mean, ultimately, this election is a choice between a candidate like Trump, who represents the past and division, and a candidate like Harris, who represents the future, inclusivity, and investing in our future. I mean, the race is a toss-up, right? We've seen it's so close because there's a lot of good ideas from the Democratic end that are widely popular, but there's a lot of disinformation, a lot of misinformation we have to fight against, both at the national level and the local and state level as well. And I think that's why it's so close. I think what we just have to do is continue to try as hard as we can, talking to voters, knocking on their doors, and doing the work needed to get people out to ensure that their voices are heard.
But Ashwin, just like you, Harris also, her mother was an Indian, and she also has Indian connections. And off late, we're seeing that more and more she's reaching out to the Asian community, to the Indian community. But the issue of Kashmir, which has been a source of tension between India and Pakistan, her position has been a little bit not in favor of India, if I would say. What do you make of this situation? Do you think if Harris is elected as the president of the United States, she would be pro-India and we will see the India-US ties strengthening further?
I would say the ties between India and the United States have been so important for both countries. Regardless of who's president of the United States, it is in the interest of the United States to pursue strong bilateral common ties with India. There's so many issues, whether it's immigration, whether it's trade, technology, talent, where we can work together. And that's exactly what I see from the Harris-Walz campaign. And that's what we expect will happen. And I think ultimately having someone like Kamala Harris, whose mother is Indian, she's also Indian and Black, she's going to be able to connect so much more with the Indian diaspora here and really strengthen those ties in a way that Donald Trump never really can.
But Trump has also made many attempts. You had the Howdy Modi event in Houston where he reached out to the Indian diaspora. So we cannot outrightly say that Harris would favor India more. But like you said, both parties don't have a choice but to see India as a close ally. And that's likely to be the outcome in the elections. But going back to the campaign and the mood.
So just one quick thing to add on that. I would just say, yes, I mean, Trump has done outreach to the Indian community, but look at the results. If you look at the number of H-1B visas, for example, approved by the Trump administration versus the Biden administration, the Trump administration has drastically decreased that. So they may say that they're supporting Indian Americans, but their actions do not match their words.
Interesting. The other question that I had was that you mentioned about the Seva Bhav and how the Hindu values that you have received over the years have influenced the manner in which you have approached your political journey. Are there any Indian leaders or thought leaders who have inspired you through this process?
I would say both leaders for me have been Mahatma Gandhi ji and Martin Luther King Jr. Because look at what Gandhi ji did. He was able to take the principles of Hinduism, universalize them, and use them to get people to understand, here's how we can get independence from the British and how we can bring people together. And we've seen how powerful that's been, both in India, but also inspiring leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. here in the United States. Both leaders were able to use the power of religion, not to divide, but to unify. And that's exactly the path that I'm following, and I want to follow in both of their footsteps.
That's a very valid and interesting point you make, because across the world, not just in the US and India, we are seeing that there is a rise in polarization, but at the same time, the democracies are becoming more and more important. You need democracies to stay and to prosper. Just in this light, what do you think will be your key message to your constituents? And this is my last question to you.
My key message to my constituents is think about investing in the long term. That's one thing which young people like me have that advantage, because we'll be around longer than everyone else. So for someone like me, I could have gone and made 6 figures at a tech company, but I decided to come home and run for office. Because for me, it's about the next 20, 30, 40 years. We want to have a state, a district, and a country where we're making investments in education, focusing on technology, entrepreneurship, thinking about the future, as opposed to dwelling on the past and the conflicts in the past. And that's really what I represent. And that's what I believe our district and our country will choose.
Actually, Ashwin, I just want to ask you one more question. You are seeing that more and more Indians are getting nominated for formal positions in politics, whether it's for a political office or as official candidates. What has been the change in thinking over the years? And what has been the role of the campaigns that Prime Minister Modi has been organizing, the big rallies that you're seeing organized by Modi, that is influencing this upgradation of the Indian image?
So Indian Americans have been around in the U.S. for a long time. In fact, we've been around here for centuries. There's a long history of Indian American in the U.S. From the early 1900s, when there are a lot of Bengalis in Harlem, to the Sikh Americans who'd be in California. And what's happened since the 60s, the 90s, that wave of immigration, is just we've become a more tolerant, multicultural society. So what we're seeing is a reflection of people understanding that the old ways of racism and bigotry and hatred does not work. And I think it's hand in hand. Once, if you think about it, after India got its independence, that was the same time when the US actually allowed more Indians to come and immigrate to the United States. So that strong bilateral partnership between both countries increases mutual respect for people, citizens of both countries, and allows us to work together, and also allows Indian Americans to succeed here and give back to the community.